Share you 4 stories, starting out when I was a 7-year-old boy, telling you a little story about a 7-year-old boy that wanted a Starsky and Hutch jacket, which back in 1976 was me. I'll also talk to you about the lesson I learned from that, about positive mental attitude and storytelling. Then I'll talk to you about when I wanted to learn about storytelling from the world's best storyteller, a guy called Marshall Gantz, and how I was rejected and how I learned from a positive mental attitude, which will probably tie into week 8 resilience. And then how a friend of mine helped me learn how to get onto the course to be more resilient and learn about storytelling. So the first thing is, the year was 1976, and I was 7 years old. At that time, number 1 in the charts were Queen, were ABBA with Dancing Queen, and also at the same time, Bohemian Rhapsody had come out from Queen. I was living in a town in Northamptonshire called Rothwell. We were living in a council house, and we were really poor. My family was really poor. We were really poor. So if you wanted something, you had to literally go out and get it yourself, even if you're a 7-year-old boy. And I wanted at that time a jacket, and it was called a Starsky and Hutch jacket. And that jacket was it was the thing to have at the time, but there was no chance I could get it. And my mum and dad would get it for me, so I had to work out a way to get it myself. So it was 7:30 at night on a December evening, and I was walking my friend home at the time, a guy called Andrew Hines. And we'd been out carol singing in December in Rothwell. If you wanted to make some money, one of the ways to make some money, even as a young boy, was to go carol singing. So we went door to door, carol singing for an hour and a half, and then he had to be home after 7:30. And he lived in a nice part of Rothwell, a really, really nice part. As I dropped him off at his house, I had this idea. I thought, do you know what? It's a cold December night. Maybe if I went carol singing on my own, maybe that might make a difference. And I thought, where Andrew lived, it was a really, really nice estate. So I decided to chance it. I thought, what I'll do, I'll take a chance. I'll go carol singing, and I'll try one of my 3 carols. I've got 3 carols. It was either Silent Night, Away in a Manger, or Once in Royal David City, which I knew at the first verse. After that, I was toast. I was gone. So I decided that I'll go and I'll do a little bit of this carol singing on my own. And when you carol sing, you get one of 3 things. You either get told to clear off because they just don't want to know. They might give you a boiled fee, or you might get a little bit of money, typically 2p, but maybe 5p or 10p. But usually you don't get very much. So on this one evening, late December evening, in this nice new shiny housing estate with big long front gardens. Typically we went to terrace houses, but in this one with big front gardens, I decided I would go out and knock on the doors and see what they had to say. And here's a picture of me, what I looked like at that time, just so you can see. So everybody see my screen. That was me in 1976, carol singing. That was young David walking up to the door. And as I walked up to the door of the house, banged on the door, walked up the garden, you genuinely knew what you were going to get ahead of time. You'd knock on the door, you'd stand back, and if they didn't bother to come out, you knew they definitely weren't interested. If they came out hurriedly, you heard them scurrying in the hallway, and you heard the door open really, really quickly, you knew you were going to get told to clear off. But if it was a slow, gentle opening, maybe a middle-aged man or middle-aged lady, you could have did well. And on this particular occasion, it was a middle-aged lady. She had white blackish hair, sort of 45, 50 years old, and she opened the door and looked down on me with my big smiling face, and I started out with my first lines, Away in a Manger. And she folded her arms and then went away, back into the kitchen, came out, and then gave me 2p. And that 2p was a big thing for me. That was a big win. And in 1976, you could buy things for half a p. And I took my money and I decided I'd go to the next door. And as I was walking to the next door, I got what I thought I'd get the next door. I got told to clear off. But then I learned a valuable lesson, and that valuable lesson was this: if you've got nothing to lose if you try, and everything to gain if you're successful, by all means try. And as a young boy, I learned that lesson really, really young. And that stayed with me. It stayed with me throughout my life. And that was the starting point for me to be successful in life. And I did actually go on that springtime. I didn't get it for Christmas, but I did manage to save a whole £5. And me and my mum went down into Market Harbour one spring Saturday afternoon in March and got my Starsky and Hutch jacket. And the point of that story is the little boy had the right mental attitude. So when you want anything, if you want anything in life, one of the most important ingredients that you need to have is the right mental attitude. And what I had was what's considered a positive mental attitude. I'll just show you this on the screen. I learned about this later on in life. Basically, what you've got, or what I learned early on, was in life, there's three things. You've got a positive mental attitude, a negative mental attitude, and inertia. The positive mental attitude is this. It's the right mental attitude in any given set of circumstances, incorporating the plus traits of life. Such words as hope, faith, and integrity. It's about having that can-do, will-try attitude. And that's what I have. And that's what PMA equals. It equals can-do, will-try. Now, if you often ask people what the opposite of a positive mental attitude, they'll tell you it's this. It's a negative mental attitude, which is the wrong mental attitude in any given set of circumstances, incorporating the negative traits of life. Negative mental attitude equals can't do, why try? But more often than not, what we tend to do, the story we tend to tell ourselves, is this story, the story of inertia. Right? And inertia is best friend with the negative mental attitude, because what it teaches us is if it turns men and women into swine like the Greek goddess Circe, if we stay and we do nothing. Now on that evening, what I decided to do was I decided to do something. I decided to have that positive mental attitude, that can do, will try. And I said to myself, I gave myself one of these things here, a self-starter. I gave myself a word or a series of words that got me to effect. I thought, I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. If you want to get the jacket, you're going to have to do it. So I said, do it now. And I did it, and it made a big difference to me. And so that was a really important thing for me in my life, and it made a massive difference. Now, how did that play out in life? How did that play out for me? Later on in life, I went on to become a financial advisor. In fact, I became the top financial advisor in the UK. In 2017, after I built my financial services company and successfully sold it, what I recognised was the importance of storytelling. What do we need to do to tell a great story? And the best storyteller in the world, in my mind, is a guy called Marshall Gantz. And he's at Harvard University. And Harvard University had this course on storytelling, and it was an e-learning course. But I thought, well, I'm bound to get in for that. And so I applied to do this e-learning course. It was going to cost a couple of $1,000s over an 8-week period, and I'd learn how to do great storytelling. And for those of you guys, if you don't know about Marshall Gantz, he was the guy that led the Obama campaign in terms of storytelling. He helped Obama with his narrative, and he created this course at Harvard called Public Narrative. So I applied to do that course, and thought I'd get in straight away. I filled in the application form, told them that I'd gone from rags to riches. I built an insurance business, just sold it. I'd recently been certified to work with the world's leading social psychologists to teach influence, and I thought I'd get a shoe-in. And what I've got is what I've got when I went knocking on those doors as a little boy. I got rejected. I got told, no, you're not coming on. Sorry, your application's not being successful. Now, knowing that failure is the line of least persistence, not being inert, knowing that I needed to go the extra mile, what I decided to do is I thought, well, what I'll do next year, I'll apply again. But this time what I'll do is I'll get some help. So I reached out and I spoke to the guy who trained me to teach social psychology, one of the top social psychologists in the world, a guy called Robert Cialdini. I thought I'd get an endorsement from him. I then reached out to my friend and got him to help me fill in my application form, made it even better. And then I spoke to one of my other friends, who's a psycholinguist, who just put together the best CV for me in the world. I've never needed a CV, having run my own company. I put together an incredible CV that talked about all my achievements, and I applied again. And this time when I applied, I was certain I was going to get in. In fact, I told all my friends I was going to get in. But guess what happened? I got back a big fat no, you're not doing it. If you're going to be an entrepreneur in life, you're going to get no's. I got a big fat no. But learning from that little boy, learning from that little kid that went out and knocked those doors, I recognised the fact that there must be a way of doing this. So I decided next time I would go again. Only this time what I did was I spoke to one of my best friends, my phone a friend who wants to be a millionaire, a guy called Paul Verlin. I said, Paul, I want to do this course, but I can't seem to get in. And he said to me, Dave, maybe they don't want you. Is there another way of doing it? So then I spoke to a friend of mine who's an academic, and I got him to apply. and he worked for the big charity, a company called Simstra, and I decided if I got him to apply, and then I sat in on the lessons, I'd get all the benefits, and I wouldn't, and basically I wouldn't get no. So my friend Bell filled in the application form, applied to Harvard, and literally was accepted straight away. Right? They accepted him straight away into the course. When they accepted him into the course, they said he fitted because he worked with public body, something I could never met the criteria. He'd also been to university and he met their criteria. And whilst he was on that course, whilst he was on the course, I learned about telling stories better than I'd ever learned before. What I want to share with you is some of the insights from that course. Because obviously I did it. I thought, well, I'm going to get it. It's just a case of how I get it. So I want to share with you some of the big things that you should do when you're telling stories if you want to get it right. What Harvard teach you in the next few minutes. I'll just share with you what some of these things are. So the first thing is when you tell a story, there's three parts to a story. The first part of the story is this story of self. And the story itself is about call to leadership. And then when you're telling that story itself, what you've got to teach people when you're sharing that is why do you care about the subject that you care about? Oh shit, I just want to bring this up. So here, in life, what you're going to have is you're going to have, when did I learn to care about what I learned to care about? So when did I learn to care? And then ultimately, you're going to have a choice, you're going to have a challenge, you're going to have an outcome. That's your story of self. So in my case, when I was knocking on the door, when I was getting rejected at Harvard, obviously I learned to care from that little boy when I was going out, when I was counselling him. So I had a choice, I had a challenge, and an outcome. And then when you're talking to a group of people, what they want to know if you're going to tell a story is why should they care? When we learn to care, why should we care? So ultimately, if we were talking about current day, what's going on current day in Ukraine, well, Ukraine is part of Europe, and ultimately what's done is wrong for all of us. So we're all in on that. We need to talk about what the choice, what the challenge, what the outcome is, where these things can go. And then also, then we need to bring it into now. There needs to be a call to action, a call to urgency. People need to have something they can do if you're going to tell them a story. So why is it urgent? What do we risk? What do we stand to lose? And by doing so, what we start to evoke is we then start to evoke people's inner emotions. So if I know why you care about a subject, and I know why I care about positive mental attitude, because to be an entrepreneur, to be successful in life, the right mental attitude is going to play a big part. Why should we care? Well, we know that mindset's going to stop us being inert. And then also, why is it now? Never has there been a tough time than there is today for us to want to actually move forward and actually tell our stories with a narrative better than there is today. So I think that's my time up for telling you my story. I'm open to questions and feedback. I hope that's been okay.
Cool. Thank you very much, David. I'm just going to stay there so we can actually chat to you.
Any questions?
So I will start with going to Pat.
Hi, David.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for that. Quite really, really good. Yeah, I definitely agree on that for the importance of storytelling. How important, when in a startup, do you think a story is not just only externally but also internally as well?
One of the first stories that you need to get right if you're having a startup is not having a discretionary mindset. And a discretionary mindset, what I mean by that is you need to remove people's rights to either be negative or inert. So the story of the positive mental attitude is one of the most important stories that you can install within your partners, within your employees, within your suppliers, making sure that everybody's on the same page mentally. And that makes a massive difference. If you don't get that bit right, you're almost toast, because what you're doing is allowing discretion at the operating level, and you'd never be successful. So making sure that everybody's on the same page with the right person, the same mindset, what that will do is it puts you in a state of actually in motion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Thanks, David.
And if you want any more on it, anything I'll share with you there, I'm happy to, I'll teach this stuff. But that's one of the most important skills. So, and storytelling, ultimately, we learn through narrative. The stories that we tell everybody are the things that keep us going. We can't be inert. So what's the story? What's the story? Tell me the story behind that. We'll do anything if there's a good enough story. So give me enough reasons, and the reasons are, these are the stories.
Definitely. And the resources that you just showed us, would you be able to share it with us?
Yeah, cool, absolutely. Just drop me an email, david@swada.co.uk, SUADA. Swada's the goddess of persuasion, so just drop me an email and I'll share it with you, of course.
Great, thanks so much, David. Thank you.
Cool. I've actually got a course on positive mental attitude. I can share that with you if you want that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. Okay. That'll help. So, yeah, I'll do that.
I'm looking at the chat.
Anybody else got any questions?
Anyone else want to ask any questions?
I do, I'll ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Dave, so when we think of stories, what comes to mind? Walt Disney, you think of positive stories, you think of happy stories.
Yeah.
Of course, storytelling sometimes, especially when it's to do with enterprise and business, you have a lot of negative stories or bad stories.
Yeah.
What are the processes of going for a bad story?
Behind storytelling, there's a guy called Martin Seligman, who's the father of modern day positive psychology. And there's within storytelling, there's a process of reframing. And the context is you can change the way you experience anything if you shape what you experience first. In other words, you change the frame. And a great example of that, if you think about Wagamama's, right? Wagamama's explain to you, say, look, have you ever been to Wagamama's before? And then what they do is they create a frame. They say, well, what you need to know is it's based on a Japanese themed restaurant. And when you mention Japanese, you can get away with all sorts. I think, well, okay, Japanese are different. You can get away with all sorts by saying Japanese. And they say what that means is the food will come out when it's ready. So your dessert might come out straight away, and it just comes out hot, fresh food, and that's what they tell you. Now, if you went into a French restaurant and they brought you coffee and your desserts out first, you guarantee that a third of the people would never go back there. So you create the frame. And within business, you're always going to get adversities. And what we need to do is understand how to reframe those adversities. The Seligman taught us the ABCDE methodology. So adversity, something happens, a belief, here's what's wrong, and then consequences. And what he studied was positive and negative people, and he recognised that people get stuck on consequences, here's what went wrong. But if you've got a really good team around you and you've got the right mental attitude, what you do is a D and an E, and this is what the optimist did when he created positive psychology. You'll dispute what happened as bad. You'll say, well, okay, that's just something we need to learn from, it's something we need to get better. And then you'll get energised and move on. And so creating a new frame and having a new mindset whereby we reframe our problems because we've got the right mental attitude, that really helps in business and it helps in life. Because every time, no matter what it is, things will always go wrong. But how can you change the frame of perspective and look at it from a different perspective? And that's ultimately changing the story.
So I was having a look at the our sort of competencies and everything else, and I think one of the things that really comes out in it for me with what you're doing is you've got quite a lot of vision. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you keep your vision fresh, how you know where you're always going.
From my perspective, the vision comes from the people around you. If you keep really good people around you, there was a guy called Robert Greene who wrote 48 Laws of Power, and Law 10 was avoid the unhappy and the unlucky because they'll take you down with their misery. So from my perspective, it's important to put really positive and optimistic people around me because then that keeps the vision sharp. It keeps you thinking sharp. Obviously, you can be more successful with that. So for me, it's about having really good people around you, and then ultimately you begin with the end in mind. If you start with a plan at the start and you keep it fresh, then you can do that. But it's all about the team. How do you get the best people wrapped around you? You get the best people wrapped around you, then your vision stays fresh.
And I suppose my follow-on question to that it probably is similar, which is how do you go about finding the valuable ideas in your people? How do you bring that out? So one of the big competencies in this module is about how people can value ideas and figure out which ideas are valuable and which ones are not. How do you, when you're talking to your team and everyone else, figure out which ideas are valuable, or do you not? Do you use a different method?
To me, it's all about feedback. Everything's going to be about feedback, and if you've got the right mental attitude, you'll always be open to feedback from everywhere, and you listen. So for me, it starts off with a positive mental attitude, and then We're always going to make mistakes. Nobody gets it right first time. But when people give you feedback, if you can get it, and then you act on that feedback and you do turn to stuff, that's where the ideas come from. So you start doing something, and then if you're listening and you've got the right mental attitude, you won't take the feedback as criticism. You take the feedback as, this is where we need to adjust. This is where we need to amend. And having the right people, nobody will be whinging about what went wrong. They'll say, okay, here's what we need to learn to move forward. And it's all about people and attitude, I suppose. That's my perspective on it. That's our perspective on it.
Okay, thank you very much, David. I want to say a really big thank you for just taking a little bit of time to come and talk to us today, because I know you are super busy. I know that certainly for me, I'd never really thought about there being an in-between for positive and negative mental attitude, and actually that inertia situation which you described is very familiar, I think, to all of us. It is easier to do nothing than it is to be negative. But thanks for taking the time. You're welcome to hang around and stay with us, or go and continue your really busy day. But thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. Enjoy. Anybody that wants, if they want to know a little bit more about positive mental attitude or the storytelling notes, I want you to drop me an email and I'll happily share some magic that we've got.
Yeah,
sorry, David. Actually, do you mind if I ask you one more question quick?
Yeah, sure, 100%.
I was just so with your narrative, with your target audience, how have you, through your experiences and your research, etc., found methods to actually test whether that narrative is effective and compelling? Or whether or not you realise it's maybe not and needs to change, because obviously internally you might think it's good, but obviously externally the target audience might not kind of resonate with it.
Can you give me some context to that, just so we're on the same page?
I mean, I guess just with kind of no kind of example, but I guess if you had some kind of external messaging, kind of just saying, what your narrative was, trying to get your target audience to buy into whatever product and service you're developing.
Yeah.
Are there specific methods that can be used to kind of, other than, I don't know, maybe just kind of generic stuff like seeing whether the product performs better? Is there any other way to determine that?
To me, it comes back to the best people. If you find, I've got this methodology, if you get the best people on the planet, they'll come up with better answers than average people, not a little bit better, 100 times better. So when we look at copy, we think, well, who's going to be amazing at copy? And get them to stay in their lane and create that rather than us having a go. If you can do that, if you're trying to put together technology, find the best people with technology. And then always be open to feedback. That's what it is. And then you have to, as an entrepreneur, test everything. But the better the people you get wrapped around you, the ones that have got medals, that have got success. My background was in the army. If you've got people that have had successes in the past, they'll probably have had successes because success leaves clues. So who are the best people that will give you the advice and feedback that's actually done something, not just sat there and thought about it as armchair critics, but actually done something. And then ultimately you trust their feedback and you act on it as opposed to just sitting there. That's how we do it, that's our experience. Doesn't mean we've got it right.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks, David.
Sorry? We'll send it out, don't worry.